Hello students, good morning. My name is Mr. Wilson. I'm going to be the literature teacher for middle school and high school this year. The reason for this video, this isn't going to be a video introduction to the class. This is going to be an explanation because some students had actually asked, so I'm using this video as a way of answering that question. Why I enjoy literature, or the reason why I teach it, why I studied it, and so on. Obviously this is going to be personal, so it might not be the same, or it probably won't be the same for everyone. Some students enjoy reading. Reading is certainly not the same as the appreciation of literature as an academic subject. Reading as a pastime is certainly slightly different than reading literature from an academic perspective. When you read as a pastime, more often than not, the reason that you enjoy it, I mean, obviously from delving into subjects that you enjoy, something that you want to learn about, something that piqued your interest because you saw it on a television show, a class, whatever it might be, and you want to have more knowledge about that particular subject. That is usually the more basic form of why people read. The second tier, I would say, is reading gives you the opportunity to enter into a different world. The author creates, if it's fiction, nonfiction doesn't do the same thing for obvious reasons. But if it's a fictional story, the author is trying to create an entire universe around that particular character or characters. So you get to see things from a very specific perspective, and entering into the unknown where anything basically can happen, even if it's not science fiction, even if it's just a regular story about a regular person's life that happens to be fiction. You still get the opportunity to enjoy a world that you don't know and be part of that world, be an intimate part of that world, because you know the person, depending on the writer, you know the person's thoughts, you know the person's feelings, you know the person's objectives, what they're trying to accomplish in their story. That is, like I said, the second tier. The third tier, and this is the reason why I enjoy literature, is that on top of those two things, which is something that I enjoy immensely, is a lot of times, and again, this is also geared towards specific authors, they write with a purpose. When they write, the words on the page represent more than just words on the page. They represent an ideology that you need to understand by way of how they describe the mundane with a specific language that allows you to interpret certain information, certainly far beyond just a written word. Authors like Ernest Hemingway, they don't want to give you too much information because they don't want to influence how you think about their characters or the circumstances in which those characters find themselves while you're reading. They want you to imagine it. They want you to feel part of it. And in everyday life, we're not privy to the information in people's heads. Right? So there are certain authors that do just that. They will give you only the superficial. That way you have to imagine everything else. That's called like iceberg information, where you only see or are given 10% of the information. The other 10% is below the surface, and you need to either infer it or simply imagine it. There are authors like Julio Cortázar, Jorge Luis Borges, Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Although they are Spanish writers, but magical realism is one genre that does this quite well, where there is nothing that's actually real. You don't know what is real and what is fake. Because it's magical realism, anything can happen, anything is possible. There are no limits to physics, there are no limits to what is fantastic and what is normal. The normal becomes fantastic and the fantastic becomes normal. That, to me in itself, is something that's fascinating. The imagination that can be opened up by simply doing that is, to me, something incredible. In addition to that, there are times, and a good example is Animal Farm by George Orwell. If you read the book Animal Farm, it's a very relatively short novel. It's a novella, depending on the format. I don't know how many pages it is, but it can be read within one day very easily. But the characters all represent an idea. They're not meant to be characters for the sake of the story necessarily. They're meant to represent, and it's a fable, so the characters in the story are actually animals. Right? But when you read the story, each animal represents an idea in politics, specifically in that story. So when you're reading it, you're reading an interaction between these two animals, but you also have to understand that you're actually reading a story about the clash between two ideas. And that idea in itself, I find fascinating, and the complexity with which an author can use ideology to explain their thoughts, their perspectives on politics, on life, on philosophy. That is the reason why I think literature is a fascinating subject. Again, like I said, that's obviously just a personal perspective. Not everyone is going to perceive that the same way as I do, or enjoy it the same way I do, or appreciate it the same way I do. What I want to convey in the class is that this is possible. Right? That these are things that we don't need to simply read the words on the page, that there's certainly much more to just reading words. Words have much more of an impact if you understand the perspective of the author within the culture that they are writing, within the time that they are writing, and with what perspective they are writing from. Like, you can read a speech by Martin Luther King, and the speech itself is interesting. He was a good writer, so it's easy to read. But if you read it with the understanding and the context of the history in that time, it's a snapshot of the United States in the 1960s. And just that, how profound that is, if you truly appreciate what he was trying to say with the words that he used and the power behind those words, the power behind his need to express himself when people needed that to be heard, right? And anything you read, you have to also understand that it's a snapshot in history. You read something that was written in the 1400s, you read something that was written in the 1200s. Obviously now we have science fiction, we can say, oh, well, that's fantasy. But if we read something that was written today, that is because that person, if they're writing something that's not science fiction or fantastical, they're writing about their culture, they're writing about the time, right? What's called the zeitgeist. It's about this time now in this culture. If you read something in the 1200s, it is a snapshot of what people thought, of what people did, and the life that person had 800 years ago. That in itself, to me, is incredibly fascinating. So I hope I can convey that in the classes that we're going to be going through this year. And I hope that you are able to appreciate these classes and perhaps get some of that from what we do. And remember, as always, if you have any questions, concerns, please let me know. My email is always available on the website. I always give it the first day of class. And I'm always going to be open to any questions or concerns you might have to be able to clarify any doubts in regards to what we're doing in class, the homework, the assignments, and so forth. So thank you for your time if you listen this far, and have a good day.